It's easy to take football managers for granted these days. They are the most important men in the most important sport. In the course of this 6-part series, I'm going to look at the history of this managerial fixation, where it came from and where it might be leading us, and also the ways in which this uniquely British passion for the man in the suit and the padded overcoat has defined and perhaps ultimately overshadowed our football. By the mid-1970s, the football manager's ascent into the public eye was almost complete. Leaning back in his chair, scratching gently at the polyester chafe of his avocado green roll neck, the manager could even have been forgiven a small surge of pride, a sense of having made it. Except that there was a problem. Football itself wasn't quite in the same great shape. The atmosphere around it had grown tribal and violent. Ancient stadia groaned and leaked. Football had grown up around the bustle of factories and mills. Now it was condemned to stand by while the bodies of its dead parent industries festered. Across this landscape a single figure continued to stride, jaw set against the drizzle. The emergent showman manager of the 1970s was football's antidote to gloom, a new strain of portable, jobbing charisma merchants capable of selling a club just by swaggering through its mouldering gates. And for a while, Atlas-like, the football manager carried football on his trench-coated back. Football managers had made a splash in the mainstream before. Herbert Chapman had borrowed the silk hat of the theatrical impresario. Jack Tin of Portsmouth was famous for his signature lucky spats in the 1930s. And George Allison, Arsenal manager after Herbert Chapman's death, became briefly famous as an entertainment mogul and socialite.
Did you ever see that terrible film, The Arsenal Stadium Mystery? Well, he's in that. He absolutely outshines Leslie Banks, who was meant to be the star and was just sort of joking away the whole way through, taking it very flippantly. And Allison comes on with his Oratown voice, and he really was a very good actor.
In the mid-1970s, these instincts for self-promotion would emerge once more, hothoused beneath the televisual glare. In this period, Brian Clough stands out, not just for his incredible level of success, transforming a low-level team into one of the most famous in Europe, but also for his incredible level of personal fame.
A small army of loyal fans and pressmen turned out to cheer Britain's first £1,000,000 footballer into Nottingham. His new boss, Brian Clough, seemed more anxious to play squash than talk about his record deal.
Clough's management was all about personality, the Brian Clough personality, an entity that would take him not just into the nation's living rooms on a Friday night, but into a kind of super folk hero status.
Famous story, Elton John told me himself when he came here once. He was sitting beside Graham Taylor, the manager, at his desk in Watford. And suddenly the phone went. It was Peter Taylor, Clough's sidekick. He said, "Hello, Graham. Cloughie and I are having a benefit, and we'd like Elton to come and sing at half-time." You know, he's only making £7 million a year, so of course he'd want to do that. Mark our card for us, Graham. So Elton was sitting right beside him, and he didn't say a thing. So about half an hour later, the phone goes again. "Any news, Graham?" And no. He said, mark our card for us, Graham. And if Elton does come and sing, you can have a look at our reserves and have any one player you like on a free."
Clough, give you a story. Darren Wassell, young reserve player at Forest, pouring with blood in the corner of the field. Physio gets up to run on, right, got injured in the corner of the field. Clough shouts in the director's box, "Leave him alone, get back in your box." Shouts to the physio, so that it makes the player eventually get up, blood all over him. In those days, we weren't so worried about wiping blood off and changing shirts and all that business. And Wassell had to play on.
In the world of 1970s light entertainment, Clough arrived as an instantly recognisable figure, a hybrid of Alf Garnett, Muhammad Ali and bigger-than-Jesus-era John Lennon. It still seems faintly shocking that for a period of several years the manager of Derby, Brighton, Leeds and Nottingham Forest was one of the best-known people in the country, an A-list face on the beige leather chat sofa. When Clough was sacked by Derby in 1973, he appeared inside the baseball ground to accept the applause of the crowd before skipping off to appear on Parkinson.
To take two small clubs at the time like Derby and Forest and win championships and then European Cups, you know, you can't speak highly enough. I mean, everybody, you know, there's other top managers, but not with little clubs like that. I think his feat was more than any, and I was disappointed, really disappointed when he didn't get the England job.
Clough was famous, but he was also a one-off and an irreproachably successful football man. Elsewhere, Malcolm Allison would style himself as something more extreme, a managerial peacock amid the macro decline of the 1970s, with his ludicrous Bugsy Malone-style fedora hat, the furred lapels and the clanking jewellery. Assistant to Joe Mercer at Manchester City between 1965 and 1973, Allison was also a wonderfully innovative coach in his time.
He became, known for his personality rather than for the talent that he had. Malcolm Allison, for example, would have been a very fine coach of an England team. He was a proper coach.
This was a twin identity that would sit uneasily, offering a glimpse of the destructive power within the manager's own conflated persona, the black hole of his celebrity. At Crystal Palace, Allison would become a regular on the London nightclub scene. He dated Christine Keeler. He later married a playboy bunny. Sacked by Middlesbrough, it turned out during the course of an unfair dismissal claim that he'd run up a £3,500 bill at his hotel on brandy and cigars. Still, Big Mal attracted his imitators. Big John Bond had played alongside him at West Ham. He would later follow him to Manchester City as manager, all equine good looks and trench-coated swagger, and an indefinable sense of being an operator and a face. The 1980s brought us another variation in Big Ron Atkinson. Big Ron shared the dandified charisma of the showmen, but really he was something more provincial and more Thatcherite. Big Mal had wanted you to know that he was having more sex than you. Big Ron simply wanted to make it quite clear that he was richer than you and drinking far more champagne.
Rudolph's frosty breath weaves patterns in the sky. It's Christmas, let's give love a try.
In the end, there was something illusory about all this. The showman may have forced the manager sweatily centre stage, but for all the widescreen glamour, neither Big Ron or Big Lol ever won a league title. The real action was going on elsewhere. Over 8 pre-Premier League seasons, the title would be divvied out among Kenny Dalglish, Howard Kendall, George Graham and Howard Wilkinson. Unsmiling and facially immobile, the dour men had arrived. This counterculture was even more stark in the mid-1970s. While Big Mal was busy squiring dolly birds around Annabelle's and appearing on television in trademark gingham suit, the era of the Liverpool bootroom was quietly dominating English football. The bootroom provided us with the anti-showman, a managerial brains trust made up of ancient, crinkly men in skin-tight Gola tracksuits. With the bootroom staff in place, Liverpool won the league title 13 times and the European Cup on 4 occasions. The bootroom was football's liniment-infused managerial altar. No champagne here, just scotch. No fake tan, no partially disrobed soft-porn actresses. Just a sense of liturgy and ritual, of tiny virtues magnified into an overarching piety. Which isn't bad going for a 12-foot by 12-foot bolt hole under the main stand.
It's a trick. They learnt a bit about your club, they learnt a bit about your players because they were talking to you in a convivial atmosphere. The game's finished now, nothing you can do about the result. What's the boy Walsh like? What's he like? You know, he's a good trainer, the boy Walsh, he looks a good trainer. A bit later on they signed him, of course, off me for 850,000. When
Bill Shankly first arrived at Liverpool in 1959, his first major act was to guarantee the jobs of Albert Shelley, Reuben Bennett and Bob Paisley, the original Bootroom boys. This was the Bootroom A-team, with Paisley, the genius, hunkered in semi-secrecy at its centre. The Bootroom would stand as a counterpoint to the personality-driven excesses of the showman era, and also as a reproach to the greatest excesses of football's most conflicted and also compelling protagonist, right at the height of his fame.